One big team. So happy to connect with you all again. Today on the podcast, I had Emily Perrin. She is the CEO of Perrin Wellness and Performance. She's a mindfulness and performance coach who uses meditation, mindfulness, breathwork, and yoga to teach her athletes how to live a better life on and off the field. She's an incredible person. I've gotten the pleasure to know her over the past few weeks, and I'm just really excited that she's a new friend. I think you all will get a ton of great things from this episode. I myself have 2 full pages of notes, and yeah, I encourage you guys to give her a follow. She's always posting great content, and maybe share with a friend or two. We could appreciate it. It could be big. And besides that, I just hope you're all doing so well. And just to let everybody know, we're building momentum, and we're going in the right direction. We're all going together. We're all in this one together. And I'm just fired up to see where we go on the next stage of our journey. So I appreciate you all and enjoy the episode. Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you over the past couple of weeks, first at Mission Primed and then over some FaceTimes and text messages. It's been a joy. And I'm just so grateful that we'll be able to have a conversation that we can share with others. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Pumped to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love it. Should we go with a Ric Flair or gratitude first?
Oh, I think a Ric Flair, right?
All right. I'll lead us off. Here we go. Let me get a 2 clap and a Ric Flair. Woo!
Well, here we go.
Let's go. All right. So start us off with some gratitude. Talk to me about the day. What are some things you can, think back on that you can intentionally express some gratitude for?
Yeah. Gratitude, man. So this has been a heck of a week for me, a little crazy, and I'm coming off a heck of a week as well with Mission Primed.
Yep.
I think 100%, everything I do with my company, right? Working with athletes, getting to work, and how that connects me to other people, right? Other professional athletes, people like you. I'm just so grateful, that I wake up every day and this is what I do for a living. I get to impact and change lives. I got a text this morning from a player that I'd done some work with about a year ago, that said meditation is now his non-negotiable in life. And that's just it's so cool, right? Like you never know the impact or the difference that you're going to make. And so I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the work that I do. It teaches me as much as, the teaching that I'm doing. So I'm super grateful for that. I am also, incredibly grateful for connection right now. Because connection, one, we're wired for it, right? As humans. But we as individuals, we make of it what we put into it. Right. And I just feel like the past few weeks for me, in particular, I have made so many, I think, new connections, but also enriched connections I've already had in place. Mm-hmm. So I'm just really thankful for that, because you just get to meet the most amazing people. You get to talk about real and genuine and authentic stuff. Are we allowed to cuss on this? Like, would I be able to say shit? Which just that is the stuff that that's what life is all about. Right. So I'm grateful for that. I don't know how many that is.
It's good. No, you were flowing with it. And I could that's great. You're caught up in it. That's what we want. I love it.
And I think the other thing that I have been really grateful for just in this immediate last week is my family, which I think at times can become just a very cliche, generic, but I was just thinking about this, I'm in a lot of transition in my life right now, literally and figuratively. And I just spent a couple days at home with my mom and dad, in transition from one event that I was doing to the next event. And how cool and lucky is it that I can just go home for a few days, right? Not everybody has that, right? Not everybody has, parents that they can just go hang out with. And there's no pressure. I literally after Mission Primed, I just went home and I slept for 2 days. That's just what my body needed. And my parents were cool, great. great to have you. Like, even though we literally haven't seen you for 2 days because you've been asleep, like, I love that. So I'm just super grateful for that. Yeah, I'll stop there because otherwise that could be the whole conversation. But
Well, I was just thinking about how I don't think I would ever cut somebody off in letting them express what they're grateful for, because it feels good for me too. And then like I get thoughts of like, oh yeah, I'm grateful for that too. And it's a special thing and how it can spread to other people. And the intentional gratitude practice, how long have you been, and it doesn't mean to be a journal every night, but like, is that something that you bring yourself back to through your mindfulness practice, that lens, right? Of, family can be tough to navigate at times, but man, I'm really lucky to do it, right? Like you end the train of thought with gratitude. Is that something that you find yourself doing a lot more now than you did, 4, 5, 10 years ago, different points in your life?
Yeah, for sure. I think gratitude is really interesting. And I know you're a super big person on gratitude. I think gratitude can be done really wrong. And what I mean by that is, I have found in my own personal journey through just a lot of mental health stuff, a lot of trauma, gratitude can really be a Band-Aid. And what I mean by that is that I think there's a lot of people moving in this space that use gratitude to simply pass over some really tough stuff that actually needs a lot of time and space, and a lot of navigation. And so gratitude has not always come easy to me. I actually have been pretty opposed to gratitude for the most of my life. Until I did get into kind of my mindfulness and my meditation practice and journey.
Yeah.
But even still, I tread gratitude very lightly. And I think I do it in a pretty strategic way.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, for example, my gratitude practice usually follows a lot of my meditation and my hashing out, as I like to say, of what my experience is right now. So that I always ensure that I allocate time and space for where I am, without trying to change it, right? Even if it's really shitty, because that is really important. And what studies and a lot of research has actually shown is that when people do gratitude wrong, or like this is very aligned with the toxic positivity movement. When we skim over the tough stuff that we actually really need to spend time navigating, it actually does more harm. So I take a very strategic approach to this, in that I always first I have my meditation practice, which is that, dedicated time and space for me to be where I'm at. I have a few different types of meditation practices, which we can get into. And then I usually get into really tapping into, well, where am I right now? Like, maybe I'm in a season of my life. Like, I'll give you where I am literally right now, which is a lot of transition, right? That's a lot of turmoil. That's a lot of, it's a lot of anxiety. I'll be really honest with you. Anxiety has a lot of energy. So I feel just kind of like a lot of constant churning and stirring. It's very uncomfortable. And so I make sure that I spend time in that and really allowing that to just kind of take up space, because that's actually needed. And we actually know that we need to do that in order to be able to sufficiently navigate through that. And so I do that every single day. And then I usually kind of finish off with, again, that very strategic, gratitude practice of like very blanket statement. Like, what are the things, like, without a doubt, that I can say that like I'm grateful for? And you know what? Sometimes it's like freaking getting in my bed at night, right? Like, I like one of mine yesterday was like, my mom does this thing where anytime I've stayed at home, she sneaks an Amazon gift card into my stuff before I leave. So I usually I get home and then I find these Amazon gift cards. And so I got home, sure enough, yesterday, and I just like, I found it in one of my bags, and I don't know why, but I just started cracking up. I was just dying laughing. Like, my mom is so like, she is such a little sneaky mofo. Like she
That's
slips
so
these in. I'm like,
funny.
she doesn't need to do that. Right. But like, so like I was grateful for that moment.
Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't say again that I necessarily sit there and say like, okay, I'm really grateful for being in a really uncomfortable place in my life.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you necessarily need to be grateful for that. Like there's a lot of, I come from the philosophy that like, there's a lot of pain, there's a
Yeah.
lot of trauma, and there's a lot of shit in the world. And we
Yeah.
don't necessarily need to be grateful or turn that into something good.
Totally.
Sometimes you just can't.
Yep.
And so I'm a really, like, I would say with my gratitude practice, like I'm just a very practical person. Like
Yep.
instead of looking at, where I am last night and being like, I'm grateful for being in a really uncomfortable place right now because I know it's going to make me a better person. I say, well, you know what? I'm actually really grateful for the fact that I'm wired to want to spend the time with that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm wired to want to continue to learn about myself, even if it's really tough. Right.
Totally.
So I would say I just, I take again, I think it's still a gratitude practice, but I take a little bit of a different spin on it because I know, again, I come from that clinical background of like, I know the damage it can do if we just like, one of my favorite psychologists that I follow gives this analogy, right? Where she's like, say somebody gives you a piece of paper. I don't know if I've talked to you about this before, but say somebody gives you a piece of paper, right? And you're just like, you're having literally the worst week of your life. Like think about like what all the things that could go wrong, they go wrong. Okay. And she's like, on the front side of the piece of paper, I ask you to write how you're feeling, right? Which is like angry, frustrated, pissed off, like sad, upset, right? And then she goes, okay, great. So say then, all right, I have you write all that down. And then I ask you to flip the paper over and tell me 3 things you're grateful for. And she says, the problem is that like, oftentimes that just really masks the work that we need to do with the front side of the paper, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying, again, I think there's just we need to take a very strategic approach to gratitude. And that's the philosophy that I come from. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Totally.
That's just how I do it.
Totally. No, I appreciate your vulnerability. You talked about so many great things that we can dive into. I want to tap on a couple, like, you always being willing to share where you are in your journey. I think it allows for greater connection to happen. And I'm sure that's a strategy for you in your relationships and your business. And I know that at the Mission Primed event, I think all of the players really appreciated it on a conscious or subconscious level. And it helps you be a great teacher. And I want to acknowledge that. I think one way that we're different, but like, this is where, you mentioned your personal experience with anxiety and trauma, and like relative to a lot of people, I don't have that in my life. I have what I consider like micro trauma when I was younger, right? I think everybody has a level of micro trauma that stays in the body and the mind and the nervous system. And so for me, these type of practices probably come way more easily to me than other people, and that's something I need to remind myself of. That's a privilege that I'm in that space, and I can't consider that other people have that same ability. And one way to think about this when you're talking about, because I'm also I treat it like the opposite in a way. Like my gratitude practice is like, oh, that's shitty. Well, you know what? I'm going to be grateful for it. And, but I, over years and time, I have that ability to, but I don't pretend that that's going to work for everybody. And I completely acknowledge the sides where it's like, well, that could actually be really harmful in the long run. And I've had to come up against that myself. But one way I think about it is, growing up with an older brother who struggled at times, so let's just say find his way, and it caused a little bit of turmoil in the household. And that's where like my micro trauma is. In those moments, at that age, I didn't practice gratitude for it. As I started to get older, my mom exposed me to the ideas that, like, because you had to, because you were being this opportunity to grow through this, you're a more patient person now. You're a better listener. You're more kind. And I was like, okay. So those ideas started churning. And then I wrote my college essay, entrance essay on my relationship with my brother and how I'm really grateful for it. And it's taught me all of these key things, but still I resented him at times through the years. And it took me years and years of kind of going back to this cycle of, you know what, maybe he actually did have a big impact on who I am. And then as I got to serve my community more and help more people, I'm like, whoa, this is a huge part of who I am. And I really can now express gratitude for it.
Yeah.
And I can think about it as a teacher, but that's like my whole life, that's like 28 years. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating how it can go. I always do this. I always get entrenched in the conversation and I forget to give you a chance to do a quick background. As long or as deep as you want to go or as short as you want to do, but can you give the listeners who don't know you just a quick background, who you are and what you're doing today?
Yeah, totally. So my name is Emily Perrin. And I call myself a mindfulness and performance coach. Sometimes I can't even bring myself to call myself that because to some degree it's like you say that and then you're like, half the people are like, what does that even mean? Some days I don't even know what that means. But essentially what I do is, I take a really kind of all-encompassing holistic approach to helping athletes, mostly athletes. I do some in the non-athlete space, but navigate on-field performance and off-field life.
Yeah.
And I do that through mindfulness training, meditation, breath work, and yoga. Twofold. I'm also in the midst of becoming what is called a licensed clinical social worker. So basically think a therapist and social work. We also kind of we look at a lot of dynamics in terms of power and privilege and oppression and the environment and the greater systems that are at play on one's mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
So my background is in soccer. So I played soccer at UVA. Then I coached collegiately at UPenn for 3 years. And really, I mean, how I got to this work is through just my own personal journey of just really what I say being an anxious mess my whole life. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, I mean, I got out of the college coaching game and just kind of really hit rock bottom. Didn't really know kind of who I was, how I wanted to move in the world, who I wanted to be. Just was having a ton of anxiety. And yeah, I really found kind of these 4 practices, in addition to, a lot of therapy and a lot of hard work, as a way to figure it all out, how to navigate what goes on in between your 2 years. And, I found just a really profound impact on my life, how I was feeling physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of the above, my relationships. And so that's when I really had this epiphany, like, holy crap, this is what I want to do. So yeah, I have done a ton of trainings and obviously back in grad school again. But yeah, this is what I do. I'm down in the Durham area, do a lot at Duke, but also have my hands in a lot of different organizations, work with a bunch of different pros, college athletes, et cetera. So yeah, that is me.
One thing that you touched on, I mean, it's come up a lot and it's just becoming, it's just really apparent to me right now is just navigating. Right. And that's really all we can try to do for ourselves and for others is to give ourselves the skills and the chance, the opportunity, the space. And we can talk about that space because I know that's big on the self-compassion piece to navigate. And I think that's where mindfulness comes in, because if you can't practice that awareness, how do you know that you should even be navigating? And we fall into those little traps so often. So let's go with mindfulness. I absolutely love the way at the Mission Primed event, for all the people that don't know what Mission Primed is, all of my millions of listeners out there, international and beyond, Mission Primed was an unbelievable event that Emily was a part of putting on with Jules Henningberg and some other pro lacrosse players, and just aimed at, taking the holistic approach to helping rising freshmen at the college level to prepare for their college experience and really equipping them with all the tools that are needed for off-field decision-making so that you can make your time there as healthy and as beneficial and growth oriented as possible. It was an unbelievable event. And I was lucky to be a part of it. It was great. And Emily focused on the mindfulness portion, as well as some yoga and breathwork things. And it was incredible. And I saw the impact immediately that it had on those players. And throughout the week, we're like, hey, what's your favorite part? What's this? What's that? And every single one of them was like, mindfulness. So cool. Never really realized it. Never really thought about it. But yeah, it totally makes sense. So I love the way that you taught mindfulness by kind of breaking down John Kabat-Zinn's quote on it. Could you, teach it to us again right here and how you approach it and how you like to teach it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is becoming such a buzzword, right? Yep. Everybody's talking about it. And I think it's thrown around a lot as something that I think we know, but there's actually a lot of complexity and detail to it. And so I have found that really, in order for athletes to truly understand what it is, we really do need to spend the time breaking it down. And that's why I teach the way I do, where I kind of break down these 3 pillars.
Yep.
So mindfulness is paying attention, but it's paying attention in a very particular way, right? So we do it on purpose. We do it in the present moment, and we do it without judgment. So I'll go through those just really briefly, but when we are being mindful, or we are training mindfulness, so we know it is a quality, right? It's a way of being, but it's also something we can train. So the intention, right, is to really pay attention, but with the intent to look at ourselves and to look at our experience, right? And how we are, as a human being, moving in the world, right? In whatever we're doing at that exact time. So in the present moment. Okay. And that the present moment is ever evolving. And again, I mentioned at Mission Primed, I think so many coaches kind of throw out like, just be present. But that's an entirely, piece of the equation that we have to break down even further, because that is so incredibly complex, right? To just be present. And I truly believe in how I teach mindfulness and train athletes to be mindful. It's like there's a process, right? We work through that. And then the last piece of it, which nobody really attaches to mindfulness at all, which is this non-judgment piece, which is just like removing the filter. By being human, we come to life with a filter. We judge, yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad, right? Always.
Yeah.
And so being able to just remove that, and again, that's a very, it's a really complex process, right? That, even the best meditators and mindfulness gurus in the world, like, still have to work at every single day. And that's why I truly love this work, because it's like, you can't master it, right? Yeah. Like, not even Tom Brady can master it, who's like, the best of all time. Right. So, that's why I love it, because it is genuinely something that changes and morphs and evolves and asks us to adapt and constantly just be figuring out more and more about ourselves every single day, every minute of every single day. And that's why I just truly love it and think it is just kind of the staple of how we should be approaching any type of brain training in sport.
Yeah. Just to pick on one of them that I think is really fascinating that everybody could really start to use without any formal training is the non-judgment piece. And it just making the attention throughout the day. I want to be aware every time I judge something.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating. And I think I learned that from a Deepak Chopra book in college, right? Seven Spiritual Laws of Success, which I've given and gifted to probably like 25 people. And I loved it. But it was like law number 3 or something, and maybe law number 2. And it's like the law of non-judgment, and super powerful. And I've had a lot of people get back to me about that specific chapter in the book. And you make the intention throughout the day. I want to become aware of when I judge something, and you'll catch yourself, because you told yourself to make that intention and be aware. You'll catch yourself judging. You'll be like, whoa, I didn't even mean to do that. Yeah. And I was looking at that situation or that person or my own situation, and I labeled it, and you will see your world through this filter of judgments. And I also think the filter can be trained to be really good. And we had that conversation the other night about kind of the I spy mentality. and how what you seek, I think it's confirmation bias, right? But like what you intentionally seek, you're going to see more and more of. It's really fascinating. But so non-judgment, can you talk about non-judgment and, maybe specifically to the athlete on the field or anybody in any walk of life, but what are let's dive into that part of mindfulness.
Yeah. It's complex, right? It's not easy. I think in many ways it's the hardest one because we are a judgmental species, right? Yeah. We've had to be, that's a big part of who we are as human beings, like just simply by being a human being, right? We're going to have judgment. And it serves us, and it has served us through the ages really well, right? So the example that everybody always talks about is like, think of the cavemen, right? Cavemen had to be a little bit more negative. They had to be a little bit more cautious, right? Because sheesh, we'd rather err on the side of cautious if there's a saber-toothed tiger behind the rock, right? Than not and get eaten alive, right? What is crazy though is that the brain is super, super smart. And so as we've evolved through the years, right, like that piece of our brains, right, is already wired into us. There's so much complexity because also just think of all of the dynamics that play into this, right? Yeah. How you grew up, right? What were your parents like? What's the environment of your house like, right? Everything. All of these things play into how we judge the lens that we look at the world through. And so I think the first thing that's really important to talk about is that it's a given, right? And so a lot of people come to this practice and they struggle with this, right? They can't remove the filter. They notice that they're constantly judging or they're constantly negative, and then they do what? They get more judgmental, right? They have this added, right, frustration, anger, irritation, right? And so in many ways, like a lot of this is like at some point dropping the expectation, right? Like, hey, totally, it's going to be there, right? The point is not to get rid of this or eliminate this. So even though the definition says no judgment, right? I like to think of it more as just like an awareness, and that awareness to me, when it comes to the non-judgment piece, is curiosity, right? Curiosity is a profound tool for anyone, right? And I talked about this at Mission Primed, right? So this non-judgment piece of mindfulness is really about, not getting rid of criticism or judgment or whatever, right? We're not going to get rid of it. So get rid of that expectation, right? Can you get less critical? Can you get more curious, right? Yep. And so in many ways, this has been one of the most profound shifts in my life, in being able to navigate the hard stuff that I do go through, right? And being able to, in many ways, just kind of like get really curious about it. Like, what's going on here? Instead of adding, and I give this example all the time because I think it's so common for humans, right? Let's say that you stub your toe. Stubbing your toe is like the worst thing ever, right? It's such a under the radar thing, I feel like, right? Like when you stub your toe, it is like
micro trauma. It's bad.
100%. Like it's just the worst thing ever, especially if you're barefoot, right? Like it hurts. Okay. There's a lot of pain, but then usually what happens is that then we literally get irritated that we stubbed our toes. Like it's, our fault, right? Like stubbing your toe is a really common thing. Happens every day, right? Like, but we get mad about it. Okay. And so it's that follow up that really does and can do an immense amount of damage. And so this non-judgment piece would be the equivalent of just I stubbed my toe. This is painful. Done. Dropping that added filter, right? That we attach to things, right? And so this is why I always make this distinguishment for athletes, because everybody gets the heebie-jeebies, because we have this philosophy that, well, the only way that we can get better and be the best, right, is if we constantly criticize ourselves and we're constantly looking at what we don't do well, right? Yep. And I have an issue with this, because the problem is that we look at what we don't do well, but then we have a lot of feelings around that.
Yeah.
And we carry that with us, right? Yep. And then it embeds into our self-worth. And so there's a huge difference between just being able to objectively look at your performance, right? And say, like, that wasn't good enough, right? Yep. Like, I simply was not good enough last night.
Yep.
And carrying how we feel about that, right, into every aspect of our day, right? Yeah.
That's a great point.
And so this is the line that we're walking with, and I should say we're exploring when we talk about non-judgment, because the reality is that it's all exploration, right? Yeah. You're never going to be perfect at it. You're never going to master it. Yeah. But I do feel like just in getting more aware with it and getting more curious with it, that can make a very profound shift in an athlete's life.
Totally. Oh my gosh.
And it certainly has for me.
Yeah. The less critical, more curious. I think curiosity drives your focus, and then your focus drives your flow, and all, flow is being in the present moment. Just that's all it is. Right. So like, everyone's like, oh, be flow states. Like, just come back to the present moment. That's what we're trying to get to. Fully absorbed. And I think about different examples with that. And, with the players that I work with, and we're trying to pick up a new skill and trying to teach them. And it takes repetition of, no, don't be judgmental. I can see it in your body language, right? Just hyper aware. Right. And it'll drive more of that. But the other line, I love less critical, more curious. Yeah. And we're right now for my academy, we're looking for potential facilities, and I'm thinking already like all the sick quotes that I want on the walls, because I love it. That's absolutely going up in the training area.
Love it.
And the other one that I use is turning frustration into fascination.
Yeah.
And making a habit of it. And I mean, it's the mindfulness practice in the motion. And I think it's really good for people who can't fully grasp the non-judgment piece. It's like, okay, just turn your judgment into curiosity, where now you're interested in it, and you're focused on it in a different way. I think that's a really good strategy for a lot of people. And then also just to give, listeners, I mean, I always use traffic as an example, because I think being in the car is like one of my greatest teachers, but I will still have a reaction to people on the road or in the parking garage. And I'll be like, I'll be like, I'm about to say something. And then I go, my spiritual framework is oneness, and that with the human race, we're all one big team, and we really are all connected. So then I'm like, I love you, my brother. I love you, my sister. Like, I appreciate you. Thank you. And wow, I feel so much better. And okay, it's funny, but let's just talk about the ripple effect on how our behavior affects our day. Right. And
absolutely,
the difference of cussing somebody out and then being like, this guy. And then I tell the next person on the phone I got cut off on the highway. And then even if I don't do that, it's just going to stay in my body versus being intentional about a different action afterwards. Last piece, and then I question for you. When Mike Gunta? How do you pronounce his last name from Evolution? PT. Ginta. Okay. Ginta, so we had another great expert physical therapist who was at Mission Prime. We had an awesome conversation. We talked about momentum.
Yeah.
And he said it like this, and I'm going to have him on the podcast sooner than later. And it was like, he's like, momentum is just a few good decisions in a row, and on the field, it's really, what's momentum? It's really just it's a feeling after a couple good decisions, and you stack a few of them, and you can lose it very quickly on the field. But if you look at it and go, I just need to get some momentum. Like, all right, what are my next 3 good decisions I can make? Intentionally.
I love that.
And I just think, because in the game of lacrosse, everyone's like, oh, it's a momentum game. And momentum, not a lot of people are talking about it at times. I've heard coaches in recent days, but in college, it was like, we either have it or we don't, boys. Like, we got to find this momentum piece, and we're going to lose every game. And it's like, we're really good when we're on, and we're not too good when the momentum's not with us. Yeah. And I think it's a healthy way for us to think about building that feeling of momentum in our own lives, off the field, for athletes on the field. Just a few good decisions. Okay. So mindfulness. Let's talk about And you also earlier you mentioned non-negotiables. Your professional soccer player you work with, he's like, yeah, meditation is part of my non-negotiables today.
Mm-hmm.
But so if you can share your mindfulness practice, and it might be intertwined with your meditation practice or your walks, but what are some of these non-negotiables that you've used over the years that have really just, helped your growth as a person?
Yeah. Oh man, so many. Yes, meditation. And I always like to make it very known that mindfulness and meditation are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can practice mindfulness, you can be mindful, you can train mindfulness without meditating. Do I feel like at the end of the day, meditation is the best way to do that? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also be very clear about the fact that not everybody should be meditating.
Yeah.
And that's someone that, teaches meditation for a living.
Yeah.
There's actually been, I've read several articles recently about actually meditation can do some damage at times. And I do believe that. And I think, again, we can get into there's many different types of ways to meditate. And I believe that there is a strategy when you are wanting to meditate and approach meditation. So I meditate, but I had to spend a very long time working my way into that because of chronic anxiety and thought patterns that were very, very detrimental. Okay. So I meditate morning and night. I like to start my day with what is called a concentration meditation. So that is and when I work with athletes, that's what everyone is starting out on. Because I truly believe that if you don't have the foundational skill to be able to bring your attention back to an anchor, right? Then you could get really overwhelmed and lost in meditation. Okay. Yep. So concentration meditation is you have an anchor. It's usually the breath or the body, but many people struggle with the breath and the body. For many people, the breath causes a lot of anxiety. For many people, the body we're disassociated. Yeah. And so there's other things you can use. You can use sound. I actually use sound quite often. Many things you can do, but I like to start my day with that. And that's a staple. And then at night, I do another meditation that is, I shift focus into the season of life that I'm in. So for the entire year of 2020, I did self-compassion and forgiveness meditation. So what people call metta meditation or loving kindness meditation has a lot of names. But even within that realm of meditation, there's a lot of ways you can do that. There's a lot of kinds of loving kindness meditation that you can do. And then a forgiveness practice. I am back to more of a mindfulness meditation, which in mindfulness meditation, it's a little bit more of an advanced way of meditating. And so we're sitting down and actually kind of our train of thought or our emotions end up becoming the focus of the meditation. And so you're kind of following those. So again, there are thousands of ways to meditate and do this. And I'm a full advocate of you've got to find what works for you. But I think you asked me about or you made a comment about how at Mission Prime, I taught it in 1 minute segments. Yes. When I first started meditating, I could last 10 seconds. And I have sat before for an hour. I think how we need to think of meditation and a formal meditation practice is that the brain is a muscle. And so that is a skill that we need to work up our stamina for. Okay. So I love to think of it like any traditional weightlifting exercise, right? Nobody goes into the weight room and picks up 2 80-pound dumbbells and is like, woo, bicep curls, like, okay, maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger, but like even that, right? That's a lot of weight for your bicep. Okay. Pretty small muscle, right? You work up, right? So you start with 10s and then you go to maybe 15s and then maybe you go to 20s and then 30s, right? You work your way up. And so we have to do the same thing when we are doing meditation. So yeah, I mean, most of my athletes, when I start them out, 2 minutes max, baby. I operate under and Dan Harris is another guy that says this, but 1 minute counts. And there's actually been research that has looked at people who are just doing 1 minute. And that makes an impact on your brain. So yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a time thing in my world. It's an intention thing, right? There is no wrong way to do it if you come to the practice with an intention to try. I really believe that. And that's why, again, I love these types of practices, the yoga, the breath work, the meditation, yoga, right? Because there isn't a performance element to them. There's no performance entity to any of these 4 things. You cannot be bad. You cannot be good. You can only do. And I think that's a really profound thing to have in place for an athlete, because almost every athlete in today's world, we are expected to perform at everything, right? Everything, right? There's a number, there's a time, there's an expectation for every aspect, right? And so having these practices, this time, this space that is built in where there is none of that, is monumental. It is monumental, right? It is
100%.
such and that's the balance. I think, we get back to this non-judgment piece, right? I always say that, like, this non-judgment piece, I'm not asking you to live your life 24/7 like this. We can't. We live in the 21st century, and especially for an elite athlete, we can't. I'm not immune to the fact that we have to win games, people, right? We got to compete. Okay. I love that. All right. That's why I got into sport. Okay. But being able to have tangible practice in place that allow you to remove that, give you the balance, right? That is what gives us this buffer in our brain to gain perspective, to gain insight, to gain the skill to be able to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, my performance today wasn't good enough, but you know what? I'm going to take a deep breath, and this is not going to affect the rest of my day and how I feel about my life, because my performance isn't me, right? These are really big things. But we don't just get there overnight, right? And so that's why, again, a lot of how I teach and how I structure routines for people, it's a very similar model to how we do the technical and the tactical and the physical aspect of sport. They're very, very aligned. Going back to my practice, I know I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I do spend a lot of time with contemplative practice, whether that is typing or writing. Or I do voice notes, to be honest with you, because sometimes I don't write as fast as my brain is moving. I like to walk as I think. So a walking practice is big for me. And that is kind of like my designated time to, like, go again. I've been posting a lot about this, like the mindful walk, right? Like I'm not, and I do this as well, right? I'm not going out with a playlist or a podcast or a book. Like, this is my walk for my brain. Now I'll do the other as well, right? Where I go out with my playlist and jam out and listen to something, do both, right? I am also, I'm in therapy, so I see a therapist every week. That's a non-negotiable for me. I love therapy. I think we should make therapy very normal. I think therapy should be a thing that we're going to, even when life is good. Because we always need someone that just can objectively listen to where we are in our lives. Also, as therapists, like, we have to see a therapist, right? Because we're doing that for people. So that's a staple. That's a non-negotiable. I also, something that has been a big staple in my life. I'm not doing it so much now because I think I'm really good at inherently just doing it
Mm-hmm.
as I move through life. But I mean, I've spent a lot of time with intentional and restructuring self-talk.
Yeah.
And so writing my self-talk down and looking at the stories that I tell myself, and really understanding like where these come from and how to rework them.
Oh yeah.
And doing that in a very intentional and mindful way. Again, I don't do that in a very structured way now, because I think I just have gotten my brain to the point where like I do it kind of on the dime, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah.
But that took me years
Yeah.
of work, and really journals full
Totally.
of stuff. So I would say those are probably the staple. Obviously, mindful movement. I do a lot of
Yep.
that. Even with just how I train my body, I would say I don't even take that much traditional yoga anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yoga has become something that I do every day, but just kind of inherently, like as I attach that to what I'm already doing, lifting,
Yeah.
walking,
Yep.
and that has become kind of morphed into how I move my body.
Mm-hmm.
Am I missing anything?
I mean,
No, I
I
don't think
just
so.
think, I mean, it's I think it's so important for people to be intentional about cultivating these, non-negotiables,
Yeah,
these routines, right? And yeah, it's
yeah,
not a big deal if you miss it here and there, but it goes a long way for our growth. And to the point about sitting meditation as
yeah.
being, you agree, and every sports psychologist and everybody I've listened to thinks that, that practice is the greatest strength exercise for the brain and your ability
Mm-hmm,
to develop focus and
mm-hmm,
awareness.
mm-hmm.
Well, we want to be intentional in our lives. That's how we go in the
Right.
direction that like we choose for ourselves. But awareness is the prerequisite to being intentional. To
Oh,
me,
100%. Yeah.
right? It's like, it's so, if I'm talking to somebody like, why should I start this practice? Well, I mean, like, this is how you strengthen probably the most important muscle, because I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it in regards to everything, right? And if we say relationships are number one, which I think they really are, because that's where we get our social connection, that's where we get our meaning and belonging. And and being in a mindful relationship and being
Mm-hmm.
mindful with your own feelings, but also, am I bringing value to this? What am I getting out of this?
Yeah.
It all starts with that awareness piece.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting thing. Speaking of spit therapy, right? I have a coach that I'm working with, and it's not therapy, but it's almost therapy. And it's Stu Sanger from Wellness Performance, and he's awesome. And you know, I've known for years that I should be doing a daily sit down meditation practice. And it took him telling me like, hey man, this really is it. Like, you got to get into it for me to stick with it.
Yeah.
So just to that sense of being able to have somebody that you can talk to that better understands the brain, what you're going through and how you're thinking about your life, and giving you some guidance, super, super important. Completely
Yeah.
agree there. And just to like share some more things on like how you can integrate it, right? So you have your morning and night practice, and you got journaling practice, and you're doing all these things, and the walking. And one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that I've taken, because I found that the active mindfulness is like super, I won't say it's the best for me or super easy, but I cling to it more. And I think most people would. Walking, I'm trying right now my new practice, and I made it really intentional about being in the garage when I'm
Mm-hmm.
going from my elevator to the car,
Yeah.
smiling, right? Because if we
Yeah.
smile for long enough, right, there's going to be a dopamine release, and we're going to be a little bit like happier in body language. And I'm a big believer in our body language affects our moods.
Yeah.
And so now I'm trying to make my walks around town really intentional by smiling and
Yeah.
feeling my feet on the ground. And it's kind of a game changer, and it's a simple
Yeah.
one. And then in college, just to give like perspective, like it was every time I went in the training room. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
here we go. Entering
Yeah.
this training room, I can bring in a new sense of energy. So it started with awareness. Oh, I don't want to bring this filter in with me.
Yeah.
I'm hanging on to this prejudgment from earlier, and then being intentional about this is how I want to be going forward.
Yeah.
And then the other ones that I think I messaged you on your Instagram when you asked people what are some of your favorite anchors, maybe, or your mindfulness triggers, which I would love to talk
Yeah.
about anchors in a second. And for me, it's steps. And I did that in
Yeah.
college. And it was like, okay, every time I go up steps, do your best to be mindful and remind yourself that I can practice this
Yeah.
ability to bring my awareness into the present moment. I
Mm-hmm.
can lessen the filter
Mm-hmm.
and be more at peace, and that's one of the
Yeah.
things that always comes back to for me is like, do I have inner peace today? and am I helping others
Yeah.
cultivate it? So maybe you have a thought, which we can dive into, but also if it can take us into anchors, which I think are a great strategy that you went on a little bit at Mission Primed. I would love to dive into that.
Yeah, I think just kind of like listening to what you're saying, I think, in many ways, I actually think the more important thing for me is that you're taking these concepts and you're implementing them into your day to day, right? So I call this just like using your mindfulness muscle, right? So in and around your day to day, like noticing what you notice. So like for me, something that has been like a profound shift is like I use my breath constantly, right? I also use what are called touch points constantly. So like a big one for me is like when I feel like I just need like a check-in, like I just need to come back to where I'm at, right? I just kind of take each finger to my thumb, right? And this could be considered, right? Like, so basically what I'm doing right here is I'm using the body as an anchor, right? As a way to, so what are we talking about when we say anchor, right? Well, the anchor, right? Everybody knows what an anchor is. It's tied to something, right? That holds you down. Well, that is the present moment, right? That's the connection of the brain being exactly where the body is, right? That quintessential, like be where your feet are, right? And if we have anchors, right? We know that we can always find our way back. I threw a couple of these out at Mission Prime, but like the reality is that like most of our day we're not with our body, right? The brain is elsewhere. 40 to 50% of your day you're on autopilot. Anywhere from like a half to 3/4 of the day you're daydreaming, which means just your brain is in the past or your brain is in the future, right? It's so and really that is what causes us so much turmoil, right? That is what, when the brain is elsewhere, right? And it picks up steam and it picks up power and it starts to go down that snowball effect, right? That's right. That's what gives us so much trouble. And so if we know that at any given moment, right, wherever the brain is, right, any given time, that we have something that we can always come back to, right? To just where the physical body is, because more often than not, right? When we just kind of like blink our eyes open and realize where our physical body is, we're okay. And so if again, we have that thing that can tie us back to just like, I'm okay, right? I'm here. I'm okay. It's a really profound thing. And so for me, like, I use my hands a lot. Just creating any type of, and this is a really interesting, like, I think the mind body connection is really fascinating, really powerful. I think many people actually very much struggle with it. I actually have found that a lot of athletes that I'm working with at the Division I level actually really struggle with it and are not very connected to their bodies. And so this idea of creating actually, and I think what I did at Mission Prime was I had them kind of move their hands together, right?
And then
and then find stillness. And what we know is that, well, actually, if you create a little bit of sensation, right, a little bit of movement, this is why I think the practice of yoga is so profound, and it allows us to really train our brain's ability to do this. You can tap into the feeling, right? So that's why I'm a big fan of, like, again, throughout the day, I will do this constantly, right? And nobody knows that I'm doing that. I use my breath a lot, but again, the breath is not, you want anchors to be neutral. You want anchors to be safe. And so, the breath and the body are not always safe. So find things that are, right? Sound is a big one, right? If you're listening, if you're opening your ears, right, to the sounds that you hear in the here and now, like you're present, right? Open your ears. What's there? My refrigerator is going off right now, right? I'm okay. I'm here, right? Using the eyes. This is called orienting. Finding colors. And I like colors because there's been a few research studies that colors are just very simple. It's a pretty, like, you want things that aren't really subjective, if that makes sense, right?
Yep.
So you don't want something that's going to like take you a lot of time to like process or mull over, right? So like I can look at my phone and just, as I drop it, just say pink, right? Pretty objective. Like I don't think there's too many people that are going to like comment on the fact that like my phone is pink, right? And it doesn't take my brain long. Okay. So that's when we're thinking about anchors, those are the things that we're thinking about. Things that are really kind of always available to us. Again, we also, I have to think about like, okay, well, someone who is, has sight issues, right? Sight is not going to be something that they can use as an anchor, right? So you use something hearing, right? Okay. If someone is, has a hearing disability, right? That's not an option for them, right? You have to, these are very unique. These are very individual. And a lot of the processes that I work with players through is figuring out like, what does feel good to you? And oftentimes you got to play around with it. Right.
Totally.
I will tell you, and a lot of times these change. Like I'll tell you the first, I would say the first 2 years of my practice, I was all breath based. Breath was the only thing that I was using.
Yeah.
And now, I'm actually pretty much all body based. I do all, and so I want people to also know that like these things can shift, right? And it doesn't mean that's bad or good or wrong or right? It's just finding what works for you at that moment. But anchors are, I mean, they're so profound. I think there's such again, it's that training. There is that element of being able to train concentration, train attention. With a sport like lacrosse, it's great because there's what we call multiple touch points.
Yes.
For an athlete. So feet on the ground, hand, and stick, right? You got a lot of equipment, right? Totally. So touch points are any time that the body is connected to another part of the body, or the body is connected to, an object.
Totally.
So that's a great, I mean, sort of lacrosse is great for that.
One that I like to add in there really quick with that is, and I've used this a lot for myself. I haven't integrated into or introduced it to all my players yet, but there's stuff for like, there's science around like the power stance, right? And your body language and how that affects you. So in lacrosse, depending on your position, but at some point you're going to be standing still.
Yeah.
Right? You're an attackman, balls on the other side. You're a midi, you run off the field. You're going to be standing still. And to be able to practice mindfulness with touch points, but also your body language. So for me as a coach, like you get scored on and like the arms kind of cross and stuff, but then realizing like, wait a minute, is this the message I want to send to my team right now? We're just down one goal. And then for me, my hands behind my back is like a very like stoic kind of position where I can like recenter myself. And then when I'm clapping, like it is a motion that internally I'm like, man, we're down 3 goals. Like, ooh. But I know that we need to build momentum by making the next 3 really good decisions. And for me, it's clapping and encouraging and refocusing. So kind of tying the touch points with also your just stance, right? And then you take it to another level and it's like, well, what's the best thing that you could say, right? And if you're on the field and you say, here we go, Em, you got it, let's go. As a coach or as a player, right? You're a player and now you're starting to encourage others. That can also bring you back into the moment.
Totally.
I love that. So when the touch point thing, when you were saying, rubbing the finger to the thumb, I started doing it. And what I realized and what I've realized through using this practice is when I can do it right now and my focus and my awareness is right here. Like I feel it in my body and in my head, right? It takes me time to really focus and put my awareness where my fingertips are to feel that sensation. And then once you do it, now you're not in the head anymore. And it's like, to me, it's like, I just want to make that point because I think somebody could go, okay, I'm listening to this podcast and I'm not getting it, but it's like, no, you really have to try to put your attention and your awareness where that sensation is. It's not the act of doing it. It's where your awareness goes.
Right. 100%. And, again, it's a learned skill, right? There is a learning curve, right? So, again, let's take it back to like a sport application. Like nobody picked up a lacrosse stick, like, yesterday and then makes it to a place like Duke, right? Like there's a lot of years, a lot of time spent on a lacrosse field, learning, going through reps, right? It's the same with this type of stuff. And what I will say is that, actually very similarly to like emotional intelligence, is that like, a lot of these things that are new, we don't have necessarily the verbiage, the
Sure.
language, the thought pattern for it,
Use it.
right?
Oh, that's so important.
So, it's something that is developed, and you have to work at it.
And it's about
But yeah,
navigating.
that's an excellent point.
I mean, navigating, like, how can you navigate ships that you can't, like, the seas
Yeah,
that you don't even know where you are, and you
right,
don't know how to
exactly.
communicate, like, that's a tidal wave versus like that's a little ripple in
Yeah,
the pond, and
yeah,
that's like, so being able to name what you're experiencing and
yeah,
giving specific, honestly, just naming, right? And that
yeah,
strategy of naming what you're experiencing, is so important. Going back to one of the points about anchors, visual anchors. I love that. So
yeah,
we had a conversation the other day about playing I Spy. And I
yeah.
played I Spy with my girlfriend Kat. We're standing out front of her
Mhm.
apartment, and she got me good on one of them, but she goes, I spy something yellow. And I look around and I go, there's nothing yellow. She goes, there's something yellow. And I look and I go, it's the lines on the street. She goes, no. I go, oh, it's the crane. She goes, no. And I keep looking. I'm like, whoa, there's a lot more yellow than I realized.
Yeah,
And all of a sudden I'm seeing yellow everywhere.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it was
yeah,
a reminder to me of how, one, I was so absorbed into that game. I had a lot of fun. And that's a practice, right? Coming back to the
yeah,
moment and
yeah,
forgetting what you were focusing on, and stressing about whatever it is. So one, it really worked for that reason. I played a game that got my focus and attention on something else. But
yeah,
two, it was a great reminder that what we seek, we often find, or at least think we find.
yeah,
And, it's like, listen, there's a lot of negative things in the world, but I do know this for myself. Again, my brain is different than every other brain that's ever existed,
mhm, yeah,
relatively,
yeah,
based on my experiences. And like, I look for the good. Like, I'm constantly looking for people to smile at
mhm,
and to see an opportunity to connect with somebody. It's
yeah,
intentional. It's taken me years to get here, and I can't wait to see where I'm at in another year, in 20 years.
yeah,
But it makes a big, big difference. So the filter, to me, it's constantly trying to make the filter better, because I think the filter is always going to be there. So the
yeah,
choices we
yeah, it
have
is.
is like, all right, I'm aware of when the filter presents itself and I'm becoming judgmental.
Mhm,
All right, let me reassess and behave the way that I want to, in a way that's in
mhm,
line with my own way. But the other
mhm,
way is like, I could also train my filter to see the good everywhere and every opportunity.
yeah,
And, again, noting that, like, this is my personal experience. It's not going to be the same for
yeah,
everybody, but like, it's something that I think is really good. And I think I'm going to start using I Spy. And then the last strategy that I know is, I mean, you've probably heard of it, like 5 sounds, 4 sights, 3 things you can
mhm.
touch, 2 things you can
5, 4, 3, 2,
smell,
1. Yep.
right? Like, so fun. So for people that have, I'll let you teach it, because I've used it. And that's the one that I use sometimes for fun. I'm like, hey, let's get really in touch in the
Yeah.
moment here. But other times I'm like, whoa, like, you're out of it right now. I need to get back into
Mhm,
the zone. And I
mhm.
use that one. I've used, and it's fun too. It's fun for players to do. Can you teach that strategy so some of the listeners could maybe try it
Yeah.
today?
Yeah. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 comes from a study that was done on helping. Basically, it's a technique that is used to, or it originated from helping people with anxiety,
Mm.
and panic. And the premise behind it is that, again, and we can talk a little bit about anxiety and panic if you want to, but anxiety and panic, they're not logical. And so what we know is that actually being able to think your way out of anxiety and panic or an anxious moment, really is not going to work. It's not going to happen. And so being able to what is called orient yourself
Yep.
and kind of bring you what I think of as like out of your brain and into your body or your experiment or your experience is really helpful, right?
Yep.
So I've seen it a few different ways, and I actually have adapted it for um, several players that I work with, because 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 can be lengthy, and we can't
Yes.
always use it in our sports setting.
Yep. Yep.
So I sometimes just do 3, 2, 1. But
Mm.
essentially, what we're doing is we're tapping into the 5 senses. So usually it's see 5 colors is what I have always seen. I think in the original study, it's colors, it's not things. Because
Sweet.
again, you're looking for things that can come fairly easily, right? And then it is 4 sounds that you hear. And then it is, I want to say 3,
I think touch points.
Yeah, 3 things you can feel.
Yep.
But in the sense that it's not like I feel anxious or I feel sad, right? Like they're, again, because that's taking you back into your head.
Yep.
2, I don't even remember what the 2 and the 1 are.
The one
2
that I've learned is smell. Yeah.
See, yeah. So again, right. Smells can be tough, right?
Yep.
Like I might sit here and be like, I don't smell anything, right? And then, what I found is like that can create more anxiety for you. Like,
no, 100%.
So I have taught it as just in 3, 2, 1, right? 3 colors you see right away, 2 sounds you can hear. And if there's not 2, then mix it. 1. What's one sound you can hear? Yeah. 1 big breath.
Yep. Oh, nice. I like that. That's great.
Right?
Yeah, I love that.
Like, again, I've adapted it. A lot of my baseball guys use it. They like it. It's pretty quick. They can use it out in the field or in between pitches or hits. But again, the basic premise of it is this idea that really, when we're talking about anxiety and panic, we need to get out of like this, like, rational thinking cognitive brain. It's just not, that's offline when we're anxious and we're panicked, right? So we need to get into the body, or we need to get into our experience and orienting, right? So using the 5 senses helps us do that. Yeah.
Where it wouldn't be hard to find smells? On a lacrosse field.
I was going to say a boys' locker room.
You spent plenty of time with the lacrosse guys last week.
Yeah. It was, 100%.
Hopefully with modern technology, we figure out pads that don't absorb sweat and stink. That could be the future big business. Hopefully I didn't ruin it by
100%.
sharing it with everyone now. It could be my idea. I love those strategies. I think they're super powerful. Reminds me of, I think, those are incredible. I don't want to actually just brush over those. Those strategies work for people in the field, anybody, anywhere, at any time. And I would really recommend for people just to try it and reach out to Emily or myself and let us know that you did, because it'll make our day. So another one kind of similar, like focal points, right? Like having a visual focal point. I know that's a big one in athletics, but it could be used anywhere. It's essentially looking for the colors, but the way that I've learned it was a story about like Russell Wilson. And his thing was, when he goes to a stadium, he still does it. When he goes to a new stadium, he gets out there for throw around, 2 hours before the game, and he picks a focal point for that stadium, and he finds it and he stares at it and he takes a breath, feels his feet on the ground. And again, that takes a lot of practice to be able to like quickly absorb into the moment. And throughout the game, throughout the possessions, he finds that focal point and realigns with how he wants to be in that moment. And a great strategy there. I love it. All right, let's do this. I don't really know how long we've been going. I think like about an hour. Okay. And we dove so into mindfulness, and I love it. And I think the more exposure that young people get to mindfulness, the better. And my listeners, the millions of them it's a mix. It's like a lot of parents, a lot of young kids, a lot of, really famous people. I won't bore you with the list of people, but I do know that they'll get a lot of value of all the things we went over. But let's do one quick dive. We were talking about it earlier in the regard of parenting.
Yeah.
And because I think that's something that could be really helpful to a lot of the people that I'm in my community with. Yeah. And, I was listening to your podcast, the Dream On podcast with Kylie Ohlmiller, and that you were a guest on, and you spoke about your dad, who is a really well-known sports psychologist. And you said how there was tension in your relationship as you were a competitive high school athlete. And I don't know if that really went on to college, but I know that I think it was high school when you were talking about it. And I'm around competitive athletes all the time and their parents. And this is a very common conversation. And one of the things that me and my partners at my academy want to get into is helping parents navigate this landscape of competitive athletics and how to support your child in the healthiest way possible. Not so that they become the best player, but the healthiest way possible. So that your relationship can be as healthy and strong as possible. So can you share what that experience was like? Maybe where you think the mistakes were and what you think parents potentially need to focus on in this space.
Yeah. So when I got to college, it was a little different because I was older. But in high school, it was tough. So my dad has a PhD in sports psychology, was a college basketball coach for 15 years, has spent about 15 years in and out of the NBA. He's been to 2 World Cups. The man is brilliant and very talented at what he does. However, what I needed as a high school girl was not that. And again, I think the hard part about it was I still wanted to be really, really good, right? I wanted to be pushed. I wanted to work hard. I wanted to constantly get better. But probably the smarter choice would have been to get that from someone else that wasn't my dad.
Sure.
Both my mom and dad are pretty competitive people. I'm very competitive. And so I think it's a really challenging, again, I don't have kids yet. I think it's a really challenging dynamic to navigate because you as a parent want the best for your child, right? And so if you have a kid that is really type A and really wants to be good and constantly wants to talk about it and constantly wants to know, like, what do you see? How do I get better? Right. It's really hard to know, like, well, what's the best way to go about this? I think that from my personal experience, I needed probably just a lot more love and support. And I say that really, I want to take a step back because I got plenty of love and support from my family, and I still do. And again, we have a great relationship that has evolved and morphed. But I think in the time, what I really needed was just a shift in perspective and to get in the car and, have someone ask, did you have fun? Granted, I was also a really challenging kid. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of internal pressure that I put on myself that didn't always necessarily come from my mom and dad. And so again, I think they're all unique situations, right? I think parents need to tread lightly because and God, even if, you've got a kid who plays football and, like, say dad played in the NFL, like, even if that's the case, right? Like, my feeling is, like, tread lightly because at the end of the day, like, your first job is to be dad, not to be the NFL player you were, right? And so, it's, again, this is such a hard, complex topic.
Can I add something? One thing though, I think to simplify in a way, and what I'm hearing is you got the love and support. And I would like to believe that it's not the case that everybody has that, right? We know that is very far from the case, but let's say that is foundational and that's in the home. We're talking about specific moments and specific strategies, right? Like you just said, I needed a shift in perspective after the game, after practice. It's not a reboot on how you are. Man, I just really extended my arms there. If people are watching on YouTube, like really a total, this is a sun salutation. So it's not a big reboot. It's not a big reboot on how you are choosing to guide your child. It's really just picking up on a couple strategies to help them achieve better wellness.
I think so. Here's I'll back it up a little bit because again, I'm a social worker, right? So I look at the systems the much larger systems that are at play here. So again, I think we as an elite athletes society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Athletes, coaches, parents involved, don't always do the best job with how we motivate or help kids process their performance. Okay.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, I think we're also starting to shift in this time where, like, because of youth sports and the beast that it is, there's, I mean, even parents are getting a lot of pressure, right? To spend thousands of dollars on extra training and all the travel that goes into youth sport. And like, oh my God, well, like if, Billy's not, only playing football by age 10, then he's going to be behind, right? There's a lot of factors that play into this and why at certain times parents are struggling to navigate, like, well, what is the right answer, right? Okay. So there's that, right? And I'm going to lay the foundation there. I think in many regards, parents need this type of stuff just as much as their athletes do, right? Like, I think more than anything, parents need to understand this, like, what is judgment, right? And what is it like to remove judgment? What is self-compassion? What does self-compassion do for the brain and for our emotions, right? And like, okay, if a kid is really frustrated with their performance, like, how do you help them navigate frustration, right? Like, this is emotional intelligence at its basic. And I just think that, like, too many of us, and myself included, until I really started to dive into this, and to be fair, like, I still need help navigating, right? Like, we just don't know. We're not educated on this type of stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So in many ways, there should be mindfulness training for parents, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
the future.
Really, so it's, I mean, specific skills, like, these are just, I mean, I think, God, one of my favorite things, and this actually, like, this comes from Brene Brown. And I think I talked about it at Mission Primed, but Brene Brown is talking about how, like, one day her daughter comes home from school and she's in tears. She's upset. She's pissed off. Everyone in her class got invited to this birthday party except for her. Like, crappy. Okay.
Yep.
She doesn't even want to talk. Like, Brene's kind of like tries to talk to her about it, and she just, like, storms upstairs to her room. Brene's like, okay, crud, what do I do? I want to fix this. Like, okay, like, fine. Like, if she didn't get invited, like, we'll throw our own birthday party, right? Like, solving the problem. Like, so she goes upstairs. Okay. And she goes to her daughter's door. The door is open, but her daughter is sitting in her room with the lights off in the corner on the floor, just has a blanket wrapped around her and is crying, or just still really frustrated. And Brene sits there and she's like, all I wanted to do was exactly that. Go in and solve it. Turn on the light, get her up out of bed, like, solve the problem, go buy her a bunch of things to, like, make her feel better. And she's like, it was in that moment that I realized, like, really all I needed to do, all my job was to simply walk into the room and sit on the floor with her in the dark and hold her hand, and maybe not even hold her hand, right? Maybe just hold her pinky finger, right? But just go into that journey with her. And I think that's a really profound message that, like, we can take as humans, but I think it applies to parents and kids with sports, right? Like, sometimes I think the job is not always to, like, fix the problem or, like, make it better right away, or, like, okay, let's spend $1,000 more on more training. Like, sometimes the better answer is to just, like, sit with your kid and where they are. And maybe that's frustration and disappointment. And, like, how do we navigate that together? And that could be a really uncomfortable thing. Trust me. Okay. That can be a really uncomfortable thing. And, like, I think about this a lot because I can't wait to be a mom, and have a family, but, like, how am I going to handle these moments? And I think this story will really resonate with me in particular, in that, like, really, I think the best thing we can do for our kids and helping them navigate what is a really complex, sorry, I live next to a fire station.
That's
so
okay.
navigate something that is a really complex system, right? Youth sport, is really just kind of being them with it, right?
Yes.
And what does that look like? Well,
Yeah.
it looks like showing them, support and care and love.
Yep.
And
Presence.
not being afraid to like understand that your kid is upset that they just failed at something, right?
Yeah.
And again, this is a way easier said than done, 100%,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one of the most, and to be fair, I think, and again, this is no jab at my own parents by any means, right? Again, I think it's a very generational thing, right? Like their generation just didn't do this. They didn't know how. But I can't wait to kind of like take that into my own parenting journey when I become a parent. And I think a lot of these skills, with mindfulness and that have to relate with mindfulness, give us the capacity to do that, right? And to help our kids navigate when they can't.
Yeah.
How do kids, what is the number one way that they learn how to navigate emotion?
Model behavior.
Absolutely. Their parents, right? So if we as parents can model that for them, right? Or show that, hey, we're not perfect, but we're going to try, right? And we're going to expose you to, this, then I think that's a really profound thing.
Totally.
And talk about that trickle effect, right? That you were talking about, right? Like, I mean, holy shit, think about the trickle effect of that. I think that's, probably a little bit of a tangent of where you wanted to go with that, but I think that's a really big thing.
It was beautiful. And there's a few things that I would like to pull on. And one, the cool thing is like mindfulness is the foundation or the apex of all of this.
Yeah.
So one thing, helping them process performance. So I have a strategy with players, it's like, when does your performance start? Okay.
Yeah.
So, because we wear a lot of hats, and I had to do this for myself as a coach, because I would go back home and be with my girlfriend, and I'm like trying to be a coach and fix her problems. And it's like, she told me, she's like, I don't need coach. Right. You know what I mean? And because she has a mindfulness practice where she can tell me like, I just need you to sit here with me, or I need you to give me some good answers and whatever that is. But when she would bring something up, just to put in perspective of how mindfulness can help a relationship, she knew that she could communicate with me that I just need your presence and just to be here. And then now I know if there's an issue, I can go, do you need me to be here, or do you need me to try to figure something out? Yeah. And I mean, that's given me a ton of freedom and happiness in my own life. That stems from mindfulness. Going back to the parent helping the player though.
Yeah.
So one of the strategies that I like to help with players, if needed, is bookending your performance. When does your performance start? When does it end? And very simple one that I hear all the time with baseball players is like, all right, it starts when you put your uniform on. Right. So when you walk into the clubhouse, and there's an example of professional baseball, he walks into a clubhouse, he's a husband, he's a father, he can shoot the shit with his buddies in the locker room and take a phone call, no big deal. But once he puts the outfit on, he puts his baseball uniform on, he's not anything else except for a performer, because he wants to give himself that time and space. He loves the game. He wants to be the best.
Yeah.
And then game's over, changes outfit, puts on his street clothes. He's back to being a father, a husband. That's his thing. And it really helps us be more mindful of just our energy and where we're at. And players, if their identity is wrapped up in, I'm a lacrosse player and that's who I am and what I do, and you walk around all day thinking that way, and you have a bad game, then you're going to carry that with you. Yeah. And I think parents understanding that strategy and then realizing each kid's different, but helping them process into and transition into, well, yeah, you had practice for 2 hours, but on the ride home, that's either when you express it or then you can start to transition. You get home, you take a shower, and now it's like, you're back to being our son, and you also have homework. So you got to be a bit of a student and be nice to your sister. Like that's the role. You're not a superstar lacrosse player anymore. Yeah. And I think that's, that to me seems like one strategy that could be really helpful for a parent to a younger competitive athlete, is just helping them realize what hat they're wearing at a certain time. Because the biggest thing that I've seen working with kids in this space is, I go, who are you? And they go, I'm a lacrosse player. That's who I am. And I go, no, buddy. And you know this, right? That's what you do. Right. Yeah. And so that's it. I think that could be used there.
Yeah. I think, the other really simple thing, right, which is like, so simple when you think about it, but I think this just doesn't happen often enough, is like simply asking like, hey, would you like to talk about your performance with me or not? And, knowing that that question provides the space for them to say yes, or provides the space for them to say no. But getting that dialogue going really early, right? Like, I even think, because here's the thing, when you get that conversation or you get that question started at a young age, that gives a signal to your child, right? Of like, oh, this is the process that is going to occur for my family, right? Like, okay, performance is done. Like, hey, you know what? Great job. I'm so proud of you. Do you want to talk about your performance or not? And maybe then, that gives them the awareness that like, oh, this is a choice. Right? It's a choice that I can say yes if I really need to. Or I can say no if I don't want to. Or I can say, you know what? I would like to talk about it, but like right now, I'm just not ready. And that's okay too, right?
What a skill that is. I mean, that alone.
Right. Those are skills, right? And so in that way, like you as a parent are teaching your children, right? And really sticking to that. And if your kid says no, okay, great, let's go. That's their choice, right?
Totally.
I think that's a really like, talk about it, right? I think so much of stuff when it comes to this, like is unsaid. And then it's like, well, I'm unsure. I don't know if my child wants to talk about it, or like you just start talking about it and then your child completely shuts down or doesn't say anything. And, so then there's just a lot of there's a lot of confusion. And I think that stems from just a simple lack of communication. Right. So I'm a huge proponent of, and like, to be fair, I think another skill that is really critical is like, say, and I do this a lot with my loved ones, my close ones. Say I'm just really struggling with something and I really need to talk to someone. Right. Usually how I will frame it is to like my sister or my best friend is like, hey, I'm really struggling. Do you have the space right now to speak with me about it? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Right. And so if they say they don't, okay, it doesn't mean that they don't care about me. It just means we're going to have to find a different time, or, okay, that gives me the go ahead to maybe go to the next person on my, what I call SOS list. Right. So what we're doing here is, these are all social skills, right? Connection skills that we all need to have. Right. And so what I think I would have done in previous examples is like, just started talking about it. And then maybe they're not in a space and they get frustrated and then I get frustrated and now it's just a mess, right? Whereas if we're just really clear of like, hey, do you have the space and time for me right now? Can we talk about this? Or, the other thing sometimes I'll say is like, hey, I actually don't need a response from you. I don't need you to fix it. I don't even need you to say anything. I just need to type it out. Right. I preface that. And so again, these are kind of like foundational skills of like how we interact with each other and how we relate with each other. And I think parents can 1000% use some of this stuff in how they communicate and get their kid communicating about performance.
So one thing you hit on, and I had it written down, and it's something I really come back to as a coach, something I really try to practice at Mission Primed. And asking the right question is always more powerful than giving the right answer in the position as a parent, coach, mentor, whatever it is, friend sometimes. And that is something that I think is such a great skill set to try to cultivate in relationships 100%. Is asking the right question. And like you hit on a few there. So I wanted to touch on that. And I'm kind of thinking like, this is like, I could keep going, but we've been crushing it. I think it's like 90. This is probably the longest one. And I love it. I do want to, there's a couple different directions we could go in. Let's go with one more quick topic on mentorship. And then I'm going to finish with asking you the right question.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up. Okay. Thank you so much for all of your time so far. It's been amazing.
Gosh. Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Okay. Mentorship. big on it. I know you are too. It's the relationship model, and the guide is incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
I'm more curious though, perspective as a mentee for you, who are some people that you can identify some specific lessons learned, maybe some defining moments that were, passed along to you through their guidance, that you can identify, and what those mentors give to you?
Yeah, this answer may really surprise you, but I haven't really had a lot of mentors. Yeah, I have not. I have not, and I've actually had a few bad experiences with mentorship. And so I think the one mentorship that I have currently, so when you're going through your clinical license, you're overseen by an LCSW who has been in the field for a long time. So my current, she's called a supervisor for me, but I consider her a mentor. She is an LCSW and she is fascinating. She is wonderful. And I just thoroughly enjoy her and have learned a lot from her. I think that from her specifically, what I have taken away in my first year in this walk of becoming a therapist, and I think it's that there's a learning curve, like there is for anything, right? And I think people have many different views on therapy and what a therapist is, and what they do and what they provide. There's a lot of types of therapy. There's a lot of ways to do therapy. And I have always been under the assumption that, well, to some degree, the therapist needs to know a little bit more and have an answer. And I think the biggest shift and kind of impact that she has made on me is that actually we all actually have our own answers. And so much of therapy and the role of the therapist is to simply provide space. And more often than not, it is not about having an answer, or giving a direction or saying the right thing. It's simply about showing the person you are working with that you see them and that you hear them. And I have really taken that to, I think, a whole nother level in terms of my relationships and the people that I come across. Like, let's take Mission Prime, for example, like last week, like 51 kids, right? And like, that's the type of situation that like can be very chaotic, very overwhelming. Like, you got kids coming in for like literally 2 days, right? And then right back out. And like, my time with them is just like these 2 sessions or 3 sessions, and then like bursts here and there, right? But like, I really believe that like, and I try to live this in a very genuine and authentic way, that like, gosh, when you're with someone, right? See them and hear them, right? See them and hear them. So often it is not about any answer I'm going to give them, any tidbit of information. It is not about, completely transforming. Really, the transformation happens in seeing someone and hearing someone. And I think that's a really, has been a really profound shift for me. And I feel like I've always been someone that like, I'm pretty genuine. I like connection. I've always been that person. Right. But it's been it's a monumental shift in how you connect with people. And so even if it's for 30 seconds, like, stop, see them, hear them. Right. And so that's, I think, the first one. That has just really kind of like transformed my life, because I also think about the times when like I have felt seen and I have felt heard. And like, those are the things that like touch your soul, right? Like that's when you just feel, I think, more alive than anything else. So if I can provide that for someone, even in 30 seconds, like that's the type of stuff that could bring me to tears. Right.
Yeah.
And I think the second one would be my dad. I think in many ways, like, although like when I was in high school, like we really struggled, like as I've stepped into like becoming an adult and a woman and someone that is in a very similar field, like it's been a lot of fun and it's changed our relationship in many ways. But his message that has always, he's kind of had two, that have always just like really stuck with me, resonated with me, very much transformed, I think, who I am and how I operate in the world.
Yep.
One is that people will not remember you for what you did. Mm-hmm. They will remember you for how you treated them. Mm-hmm. And two would be the greatest gift that you can give yourself, is, this gift to constantly, want to learn about yourself and gain more insight and awareness, and to simply jump on this journey of growth. And so those two things have like really transformed who I am. And I think that's very much why I'm kind of like the curious creature that I am. And I very much am into mindfulness, and I have an Amazon addiction because I order a new book every 2 days, right? Because I just constantly, like, I'm a sponge. I just want to learn. I just want to grow. I just want to take baby steps each day. Because I think that not only changes me, but it changes the world, and that impacts society in a greater way. Right. Yeah. And again, I've never been someone that like cares about accolades or like, I will be the first to say that, like, I look at my college career in particular, like I was not a starter. I didn't play a lot. I wasn't an All-American, but like, I tell you what, like I go back to UVA athletics and like people remember me because of how I treated them. Totally. Or, stopping in and saying hello, right? Taking the time to, again, like see someone and hear someone. Amazing. And I think that's a really, like, again, I say this a lot to my athletes that like really feel like they're in the thick of it, and like, winning or losing or like being an All-American or not is like the ride or die thing. And I'm like, dude, 20 years from now, no one's going to care.
No one's going to care. You
think people are really going to care, how many goals you scored in that game? Like, no, they're going to remember if you were an asshole or not. So, that's the stuff that, again, that's the monumental stuff, in my books. So I would say those two.
I love it. Just to highlight those things, being able to cultivate a practice of seeing and hearing the individuals that you speak with, what you're getting from the, what would you call her besides like, she's a part of your cohort, or she's your guide in your process to get your
she's my supervisor. I mean, you can 100% call her mentor.
Mentor. So your current mentor, and then learning that from your dad, the best gift you can give to yourself is to constantly evolve and learn about yourself. And I love that especially as a gift, right? Like, hey, constantly evolve, learn about yourself forever. But like when you frame it as like the best thing, the best gift that you can do is to go on that journey and stay true to it. I love that. I think it's super powerful. I think all the work you're doing is definitely making your community and beyond a healthier and better version of themselves. And hopefully, I'm a big believer in the ripple effect, and that we can all impact change in ourselves and the people around us, and it will just continue on and on. So I'm so grateful that we have built a relationship, and that I get to call you a friend and learn from you. And I'm excited for whatever comes in our futures. And I'm so grateful that you're able to share a lot of these messages, and I believe that it will have a positive impact. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I know it's funny. I really haven't even looked at the time. Like, I realized we've been talking for a while, but like, it's these conversations like are amazing. The feeling is very mutual. I'm so glad. Again, I think you and I both operate under this, like, the world connects people and puts people in front of people for a reason. So I feel very, very grateful and very honored to be a small part of what you're doing.
Oh, you're the best. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.